Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Tales from the Darkness. Gather round and try to stay in the light. Some of the others from the dark aren't quite as civil as I am, and I hate cleaning up that mess. Boyfriend turned catfish turned stalker from Asteria. I'd like to think I have pretty decent instincts now when it comes to knowing who has bad intentions, but I wasn't always as cautious and observant as I am now. When I was in high school, I always felt so ugly. I had low self-esteem and anxiety, which was really more of a problem rather than my looks. So if anyone of the opposite sex gave me even a little attention, I would start to like them. I was pretty innocent, despite how desperate I was, having only kissed one boy. So when I was 17 and a college guy showed interest in me, I immediately clung to him. I was on this app before Tinder, and I met a guy who lived 7 hours from my home city. His name was Brandon, and he was gorgeous. Blonde hair, muscular, blue eyes. He played soccer for his university and was 19 years old. Honestly, he wasn't my usual type. I really like guys with darker hair and eyes. I still do, but he was really handsome and really kind. He would shower me with compliments and talk to me all the time. I lived alone, long story, in an apartment with just my cats. So when I would get lonely or scared, he would always comfort me. A month into talking, he starts asking for pictures. Not ones of my face, but obviously nudes or bra pictures. Now, this was nearly 6 years ago, and I didn't have a good concept of stranger danger on the internet. I mean, smartphones had only really been around for 2 or 3 years at this point, at least in my school and with my age group. 17-year-old me who was so insecure wanted to make him happy because I couldn't believe I had gotten a guy like him. I was ready to do anything he asked. I never sent naked pictures. I was too insecure for that. But I would send pictures of me in my bra. He would shower me with compliments, saying how sexy and beautiful I was, and I fell for every word. With time, I started to get upset though. I wanted to see him. I would always send him pictures when he asked, but he never sent me any. He would show me body pictures of him with his shirt off or something like that, but the pictures were always of bad quality. When I started getting too persistent, he promised he would start calling me. For some reason, this appeased me, and we'd talk many times a week. After a couple of months, he got increasingly sexual with me, telling me what he wanted to do with me and how badly he wanted me. This made me nervous since I had only ever kissed a boy, but it made me a little excited. It felt good to be wanted by someone I had really grown to like. This was all during the first semester of my senior year at high school, and I was going to turn 18 the next semester in late January. As it got to Christmas time, he started to talk about coming to my city to see me for my birthday. This had me really excited because I wanted to see him in person so badly. We had first talked about me going to him, something he had insisted on, but I chickened out and I said I couldn't do the drive alone. An excuse. I really didn't want to go to an older guy's house and stay with him alone. My own house made me feel more safe. We planned on a weekend after my birthday and everything seemed fine. But then one day, while I was in my choir class, my best friend, an exchange student from Germany, was talking with me about him. I was telling her about him and showing her pictures, and she got very unsettled. She asked me if I had ever seen him on video. I told her no, and she gave me a skeptical look, and told me that something doesn't feel right. There is no way he's real. Not that you couldn't date someone like him, but he is too perfect. She was very direct and blunt with me about it, something my other friends weren't. So I took her words to heart, and I'm so thankful I did. I immediately asked him for a picture of his face. He made up some excuse about how he couldn't take a picture right then. So I persisted, asking every day. Finally, my instincts were kicking in and I was getting scared. I told him I wanted him to video call me. He said no. I fought him on it for hours one night, telling him that if he tells me the truth, I won't get mad. He refused. I put the name he gave me into Facebook, determined to find him on my own if he wasn't going to give in. Nothing came up on him. I texted him, telling him I couldn't find his Facebook, and he gave in, giving me a completely different name and told me, "That's me." I remember just feeling cold as I read that. I looked up the account, and everything he had told me was a lie. His name, his face, his age. He was 25, not 19. I was terrified. I thought I had been talking with someone just 2 years older, which is legal in my state, but he was 8 years older. I immediately stopped texting him. That's when he started getting obsessive. He would call me dozens of times a day, call me over and over again. He would beg me to answer him, to give him a chance. Then he started threatening me to answer. He told me he had saved all of my pictures. He kept them all and told me he would send them to my friends and family on Facebook, show everyone me in my bra, and show our text messages talking about what he would do to me sexually if we met. Looking back, all of that was more damaging to him than me, but I was young and stupid and afraid. I hated my body so much and I was terrified of people seeing it. So I started talking to him again, more reserved and cautious this time. The days inched closer to my birthday and the weekend we had planned. Our messages had become bland and short since I was trying to make him lose interest in me, but he never gave up. If I took too long to message, then he would threaten me again. My birthday fell on a Monday that year, and he sent me all kinds of messages. I don't even remember what I did that birthday. I didn't have many friends, and I've never liked to celebrate, so it was probably small. When Friday hit, I got a text from him that morning saying he was driving to my city and that he would pick me up from school. I was terrified. I had lost a lot of my friends the semester before, long story, so they obviously had no clue of my situation. Out of desperation, I went to one of my guy friends who I hadn't talked to in a couple of months and spilled everything to him. He was a longtime friend, so he was sympathetic and promised to follow me home that day. I went straight to my car, ignoring the mass amounts of texts saying, "Where are you?" and "I'm here." My friend drove behind me all the way to my apartment, which he had no clue I was living in, and stayed with me as I cried for a while. I turned my phone off and my friend left later in the night. Brandon had no clue where I lived, but I was still paranoid. What if he somehow found me? Only 3 people knew where I lived, 4 now with my guy friend, and he didn't come in contact with any of them. When I finally turned my phone on, he was threatening me again. I was so exhausted and fed up, I started spam texting him, yelling and venting. I told him how stressed he had made me and how what he was doing is wrong. I told him to send the pictures and that I didn't care anymore. I started to attack his character, telling him how no one could love him if he hides who he is and then treats people like crap when they catch him in the lie. Thankfully for me, he had enough care for me to take my words to heart. He apologized and told me he deleted all the pictures. He swore to leave me alone as long as we can still talk every once in a while as friends. I agreed, even though I knew I was lying. I talked to him for a month, with only short responses until he finally gave up. Even now at 22, I still see his name appear sometimes. I blocked his number and deleted him on everything, but his name still shows up sometimes on my Instagram or Snapchat when he is trying to re-add me. He's the reason I don't give my name or picture out. To Brandon, who lied and collected underage pictures of me and then threatened me with them, let's not meet. Odd Coworker was a lot more than odd. From Anonymous. I was working in an orthopedic operating room as a nurse when I first met N. He was a new coworker, and I heard he was a bit weird, but nothing could prepare me for that moment. Though he looked like a fairly normal middle-aged man, my stomach completely turned. You know that feeling in the pit of your stomach, where you know something isn't quite right, but you can't pinpoint it? That's the feeling I felt as soon as I laid eyes on him. I tried to shake it off, but I just couldn't. Now, N was a bit weird and had an unconventional personality that made him seem quirky. That's the nicest way to put it. He would do yoga poses in the middle of an operation, loved to talk but completely off subject of the surgery, and was almost overbearing. But he was overall very polite and kind to everyone he met, making him seem harmless. I still couldn't shake that gut feeling though. I ended up confiding in one of the other nurses I work with, let's call her Kay, that something about him made me uncomfortable. She took me to the corner and said she felt the same, but had no reason why she felt this way. We agreed to keep an eye out for each other and just keep our distance from him. Now, Kay and I are pretty friendly people, and we often got questions about why we obviously didn't want to engage with him. We were polite and talked to him when it regarded patient care or the procedure, but we would avoid any other conversations with him, especially the ones of him talking about his son's behavioral issues, an upcoming sudden divorce from his wife, and how he broke his wrist. He would ask about our families, children, and personal lives often. We would find a way out of the discussion kindly and run for the hills. We basically looked like unfriendly assholes to a harmless man going through a hard time, all because something that we couldn't even pinpoint about him made red flags go up. Kay and I tried to shake it off, but we just couldn't. We started second-guessing our instincts and almost felt guilty about not engaging with him like we would with our other coworkers, until about 2 months ago. N was supposed to show up at work, but never did. Management called and eventually decided to do a wellness check after not getting in touch with him for a day. Our wellness check policy came about when another nurse never showed up to her shift because she had committed suicide, and they feared he might be thinking the same thing since he was having such a rough time. I went on with my day as usual during this time, when suddenly Kay burst into the operating room after we had just finished a long operation. I had just helped get the patient out of the room when she shoved her phone in my face, and I finally understood why we had our primal instincts kick in as soon as we met him. I saw his mugshot, his face twisted in harsh malice, and his charges: child pornography, human trafficking, and sexual assault. Kay and I looked at each other in complete disbelief. Though we knew something was wrong, we never would have thought of this. We were sickened and honestly grateful for the gut feeling. So N, from a protective mother and serious patient advocate, let's not meet. Ever. Headlights. From Candid Cavan Site. This was around 2 years ago, after going to see a movie with a group of my friends. I live in a small town, so the nearest decent movie theater is about 40 minutes away. I'm always the driver because my car is the most functional for those long distances, and I'm also kind of a softie when it comes to doing favors. This also means I'm always the last one to get home for the night, and it's usually very early in the morning when I finally get home. This specific night, it was pretty late when we got back. Like I said, it's a small town, so when it gets late, the roads are pretty much dead. There's an order that I drop everyone off in, the furthest from my house to the closest, logically. We're pretty spread out from each other. If you've ever been to a rural town, you'll know that there's a lot of twists and turns on back roads like that. I dropped off one of said friends, and there was only my boyfriend left. I drove towards my boyfriend's house and stopped at a T intersection along the way. The road in front of us was lit with streetlights, but the further you looked down either side of the road, it was dark. There were no cars anywhere, as I expected. I turned onto the road and headed towards my boyfriend's house. Not even a minute down the road, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror. I don't know when they'd shown up, but I remember noticing them because the headlights looked like the ones on a friend's car. There were 4 lights all around and arranged like the corners of a trapezoid. For a moment I thought it could be my friend, because the lights were so distinct, but the vehicle looked much larger. I brushed it off and continued driving. We were on one of the main roads, so it didn't surprise me that they continued to follow behind us as we went. After a little while, I turned onto a back road that was pretty hilly. but it was the shortest way to my boyfriend's house. The vehicle turned onto that road as well. It still wasn't that weird. My boyfriend lives in one of an assortment of ranch houses, so we've had a lot of people follow behind us to that section of the town, and then eventually taper off into their separate driveways. They were pretty far behind us as well, so I didn't think much of it. Sure enough, they kept taking every turn we took. My boyfriend and I even began to joke about how long they had been behind us. It was only when we turned into his driveway that we grew concerned. He has a long driveway that goes up a hill. I reached the top and could see the vehicle slow down at the end of his driveway, and then it turned in and began to slowly drive up, very slowly. My boyfriend and I sat in my car looking at each other because we didn't know what the hell was going on. As it got closer, we went through every possible person it could have been. We even considered my sister, who could have recognized my car and wanted to scare us. It was a reach, since no one we brought up owns a car that looks like that, but I was praying that was the answer. They reached the top and parked maybe 10 feet behind me. Then they turned off their headlights and sat there. It was too dark to be able to make out what kind of car it was. I kept turning in my seat, trying to see if someone was walking around, or if I could catch a glimpse of their vehicle. We sat there for a long time trying to figure out what the hell was happening. We didn't dare step out of the car, and I kept the engine running in case I needed to make a break for it, although they were parked directly behind me, blocking the driveway. I'm not sure how long we sat there for, but there was a good while that nothing happened. Then I heard a creaky door open and shut. I instinctively pressed the lock button on my door, even though my car was already locked. I watched as a middle-aged or older man came into view in my side mirror. As I watched him step closer, I leaned away from the window towards my boyfriend in the passenger seat, and the man walked up to my window. He had a pretty big gut, and his silver hair was pulled into a ponytail underneath a red cap. He cupped his hands and peered into my car. I can still remember him looking right at me so vividly. His expression was blank. I couldn't even move. Then he stood back up. He pointed back towards his vehicle, said something I couldn't hear, and then just turned around and left. He didn't turn his headlights back on until he reached the road. When he turned, I could see the dark outline of a truck bed. My boyfriend and I sat there stunned for a long time. My boyfriend and his stepdad drove me to my house to make sure no one followed me there either. He hugged me before I went inside and said he'd give me an update the next day. No one we knew could explain it, or knew who he was. I haven't seen a similar truck since then, but if I notice a car that has been following me for a while, no matter what it looks like, I make sure to take a few extra turns away from my house until they've turned onto a different road. I can't help the sneaking suspicion that things may have gone a lot differently if my boyfriend wasn't in the car with me. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you want to hear more. If you have any suggestions for future videos, feel free to leave it in the comments down below. If you would like to have your story narrated, you can send it to storiesofdarkness55@gmail.com. And as always, pleasant dreams.